And greetings and salutations, my psychedelic children, my beautiful souls, and welcome once again to the expose into the art of conversation. We got nothing. I am your host, Catalyst Jost, once again coming at you from the beautiful sunshine wasteland of Central Florida, and I am here today with a very special guest, author, writer, and publisher of such works such as Dark Desire, Desire Me Again, and much most recently, Fatal Distractions. Please help me welcome one, Virginia Wallace. Hello.
Hello. I've never had quite an introduction like that, so I guess thank you for the newness of that.
It's one of my specialties indeed. How are you feeling right now?
Doing great. How are you?
Not too bad, not too bad. I'm just been recently relaxing after a very, very hard week at work. Temperatures are starting to balance out a little bit down here in the Sunshine State. How is the weather where you're at?
Oh, you don't want to know. You really don't want to know. And I'm laughing because I know where you are and I know where I am. It's you say cold. It's not cold. I would be outside in shorts and a t-shirt, 30 degrees.
No, I understand what you mean. When I was originally living in New York, I when it came to winter, like the negative 20s at night were so common, and it was just like. But at the same time, too, summers are so hot over there. It can raise to 90, and I'm just like, what?
Yeah, it's crazy. I'm not a fan of either bitter cold or extreme heat. My favorite season's always been fall. And
I
spring is a second close, but fall, definitely.
I 100% agree with you because there's something more spiritual about fall. Like, it's not too hot, it's not too cold, but like, it's almost, there's something about it that gets in the air. And I'm not talking about pollen, I'm just saying, like, the smell of the leaves and growing up near mountains and stuff like that, the scenery just changes and it's just such,
Yeah.
it's a different feel.
I know people usually associate spring with the newness of life and new growth, but honestly, I'm most creative in the fall. I feel like that is the time of year that my senses are most awakened, and I actually, you know, I dream and I have very vivid conversations and meet new people, and just the creative juices are flowing more for me in the autumn than any other time of the year.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. Like, what is it? I find that a lot of my best writing, like, or even like, I get so much more motivation for creativity right around the autumn season. It's unparalleled. Which, speaking of which, tell me, when did you decide to get into the writing business?
Oh gosh. Well, officially, I've been writing a long time, but my first full length novel got signed with Black Velvet Seductions in 2020. And I'd spent years before that submitting it to publishers, but it finally saw print in 2020. And so I didn't know anybody in the industry. I was kind of flying blind on it.
Now, how long have you been writing, like, period?
Oh, probably since I was the teenager, um, about 30 years. Oh, maybe I shouldn't say that. That really gives away my age, and us ladies don't like to do
It
that.
is what it
but
is. No judgment on this podcast, I reassure you.
so it's been a long time. I was inspired by role playing games that I've loved ever since I was probably 12, 13. Love Dungeons and Dragons.
Yes.
Started off writing short stories mostly, and I never really tried to publish them. I did it for fun. I was the Dragon Master a lot of times in the games, and I just loved writing stories, loved creating the adventures.
That's why I've always been such a fan of D&D. I mean, I never stood a chance because my uncles would always like Heck, I was rolling a d20 by the time I was two. So I didn't stand a chance, but like, and especially with the growing popularity, the explosion of it in more recent years, more recent decades, like people are starting to really like understand, like especially for creative types with writing, how that can be an effective medium.
Oh yeah.
Like it's so customizable, and yes, it's the perfect way to get the writing juices flowing. Hell, I have an uncle who actually did a book report based off a D&D campaign. No, it was a writing report of some sort.
And I agree. I mean, I know kids these days are more into a lot of times the electronic games and Halo, and there's nothing wrong with that. It's just that I feel a good old fashioned game, role playing game, is so much more creative. It forces the players to be a team and to go on this quest, this adventure together. And I think that you really you learn so much more about yourself and about your friends and about life from that versus a game that's electronic. It's already been programmed with options that your player can go through, but it's not you participating and giving, it's not you building your own story.
Yes, yes, and more importantly, it gives you that one-on-one interaction that you
Yeah.
just do not experience through online video games and everything like that. Plus, there's more mechanics that go with it. You got math, checking out the stats. You also get to play with voice acting, but also because of the nature of it, you can also just goof off with your friends, and nothing is more phenomenal. Which actually, come to think of it, is that why you've chosen to write more fictional genres like fantasy and horror and stuff like that?
Right. Well, I jumped into fantasy and horror and romance because I'm not fond of reality, I guess you could say. It's just these are the genres where you can really express yourself and your emotions and your dreams and your hopes without being tied to the ground. I love my books, movies, comic books, role playing games, anything that pulls me out of the real world and the stress I feel day to day for a while. Like I said, I just feel like that's where I can really be me and not have to worry about the confines of my physical space and life, and just really let my mind be free.
Jeez, you just touched the soul of it right there, because like, yes, yes, living in the corporeal realm that we live in, it is not perfect, and like it can get dark and down sometimes, and especially with adulting, with everyday life. But with creativity and such fictional genres like fantasy, horror, sci-fi, and like even like stuff like comedy and romance, these
Mm-hmm.
are like, these are mediums where like, and especially through writing, where you can write your own stories, your own endings, be they happy or be they philosophical. And more importantly, because it is you creating it, like you don't have to fear
Mm-hmm.
judgment. It just flows naturally, like spiritual energy itself, and or water.
Well, and some people gravitate more toward nonfiction, and that's fine. I call them the brainiacs. The people that they're just so based in research or fact, and that's important. We need that too. But for me, the release creatively has always been, well, I want to write my own story. I want to be my own character. I want to be different than what I really am, and I can explore that freely through writing fiction. And it's special. And I think a lot of people, if you're a fiction fan, that's why we run to it. We run to it because we can get away from our real lives and explore being a different person, being in a different place or time, even different universe, whatever it is, without feeling condemned and judged.
And with that being said, also, Would you ever consider writing any nonfiction projects in the future? And if so, like, what would the subject matter be?
Well, given that my natural talents and like we just talked about, pull is toward fiction, I think I would possibly like to write my own biography if I got a chance.
Be
That it would be
nice.
very, I don't know, very self exploratory in a way that is a little scary, but I think therapeutic. And, I actually read years ago Stephen King's book, Danse Macabre. It's an informal study on horror. And I think it taught me a lot about, that genre and how to write horror. But the flip side is that there are times we have to come out of our own little self-made universe and face reality. And so for that reason, outside of fiction, my favorite type of work is biographies, honestly. And VirginiaWallace.com, my blog, does have a fair amount of nonfiction writing on it, but it's mostly talking about how to write fiction. So if we have readers out there that, want some good tips, I've gathered some, and then lots of my other author friends and colleagues that post there, you're really going to get some great information.
Awesome, awesome. Tell me, what was your? I think you answered this before. Your work with Black Velvet Seductions. That was your first published work.
Yes.
And how
It
long?
was a short story, actually. The very first published work with Black Velvet Seductions was my short story, Renewing Forever.
And tell me, how long did it take you to like write that particular story?
Well, it didn't really take long to write the story. I was newly married at the time and just wanted to write a fantasy story about challenges of getting married. After that, the first full length novel was When the White Knight Falls. And on the other hand, that one, there's three versions actually. The first was written back in 2003 or 2004, and it was awful. We live and learn, right? And then the second was so-so, and the final version is what actually saw print in 2021 as When the White Knight Falls.
I always find it like, for me, like, especially being a new writer, like just getting their feet wet, can find it hard sometimes to go back to my old work and reread it. Like it's
Yeah.
just from like a cringe standpoint, and I'm just like, ugh, yeah, that was something. But at the same time too, there is a beauty of it in like almost seeing like a child like grow up, your own child grow up. You see the evolution of what you produced right in front of you, and like it can be a little bit rough, but like it's so beautiful and it's so interesting and it's so self-reflective, you know?
It is. And, every artist has that experience. It doesn't matter what your art is, writing, acting. You hear actors talk about it all the time. They often don't like their own movies or scenes, or they're very self-critical when they go back and watch it. But um, I think I think to be a good artist, you actually have to experience that. You learn from watching your own, or going through and reviewing the things that you've done, and you can tweak things. You can learn from your own. I don't want to call them mistakes, although sometimes there are mistakes, but it's a learning experience, and you also have to find yourself and improve by going over the things that you've done in the past and just seeing how you've grown
I
and
should
change. You're right. It's necessary.
I should really take that advice because a fun fact, I have never actually went back to listen to any of my old podcasts there. Like
Oh,
with writing, it's a little bit different. When it comes to the podcast game, it's just been more or less like again, there's a bit of insecurity there, but also there's the fact that and especially with this type of medium, I don't like to deep dive too much in the past, especially with like the whole setup being like what's current or like just having the conversation in the spur of the moment and like going back. I don't know. Part of me thinks it can be regressive, but you are correct in the vein that like it can really teach the artist how to better improve the product. And also, again, going back to it, like seeing the evolution itself, it can be absolutely mind altering in the best of ways.
It's like journaling, it's your journal stands for the evidence of how you feel at that moment about something, whatever it is. It's your brain vomit, get it out on paper. But you go back weeks, years later, whatever it is, and you realize, all right, I understand that this is how I was feeling at the time. This is what I was going through. It it does help you move forward, um, to see where you don't know where you're going and where you even want to go unless you know where you've been, if that makes sense. Um,
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Maybe not the best way to say it, but you can't you can't clearly identify your future goals until you have looked at where you've been and the struggles you've been through, and figure out how else to change and to grow and morph into something greater.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And speaking of which, like the recent project, which I again am internally grateful for you actually looking at my short story and you
Yes, it
helping
was
me.
awesome.
Thank you, helping me with the publishing and writing process, and I can't wait to do more projects in the future and hopefully do more collaborations with you. That also being said, now I was very curious reading a few of the short stories you had written in the collection there. Now,
Little distractions.
so one of I think this was the first story on Fatal Distractions. The Budsome affair. That wasn't quite like scary, but holy
No.
jeez, that was an interesting. That made me laugh hardcore. Now, what was what was the inspiration behind the idea of this very like I don't want to say simple, but innocent. This very innocent Southern gentleman
Right.
going into a very erotic establishment unbeknownst to him, and that's how he meets his wife.
Well, I mean, bottom line is it's a love story. Similar theme to, again, my first written novel, When the White Knight Falls. It's a love story, and I wanted to write a different love story, based about the clash of, you know, culture and understanding of the world in a way. So you have the heroine who's, influenced by the sexual revolution of the 60s and 70s. And then you have, like you said, a small town hero who's raised with very traditional values. And, I thought it would be really funny to write a story about, what happens when these two extremes bump into each other head on and fall in love. It's um, comical. And I just wanted to kind of play with that. I mean, some of the other stories in Fatal Distractions are so dark. You got Five Candles, A Time to Die, and your story, Thirst. I just thought it would be a good idea to put in some silly humor into this
Yes, yes,
short
yes. Like lighten it
collection.
up, ironically
Yeah.
speaking. Your wit is absolutely it's impeccable. Like hell, I even going back to Dark Desire with the short story of the serial killer couple there. Like you
Oh,
see you see how the like different form of comedy in a way, but like it's those kind of like light touching moments because I forget where I heard this. Technically, comedy and drama might not be considered genres. If anything, they're tones, they're moods, like light versus heavy. You know what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm. Yep, exactly.
And the next story that I was very curious about definitely played with more supernatural and otherworldly elements, but the tone was still definitely light, and I think all the best for it. That being the protocols.
Yep, exactly. So this one, The Protocols, is a classic alien abduction story, but with some nice twists. Again, I thought it would be really amusing to play with the idea of, well, what would happen if these aliens came to the Earth and knew nothing about our planet, about us as a species, about food, our art and music, religions, everything. I mean, the possibilities for misunderstandings there are endless,
Yeah,
and it's just meant to, again, really play with the idea of how some things really are crazy and stupid in our world, and we should look at them like outsiders and think, well, what do other people see in this? What would an alien think? How would you describe rap music if you had no idea what it was? There is a scene in that story with a very famous rap artist, and I actually like this artist. So it's not meant to be an insulting thing, but it's just meant to show the humor in humanity. I think our nature and how often we misunderstand each other. I thought it would be funny to explore what an intelligent being from another place in the universe might think if they came and saw some of the things that we do.
exactly, exactly. And yes, yes, the scenes with the famous rapper that you were talking about, and actually, I think the one that made me snort laugh was when they abduct what they consider to be a Buddhist
Yeah.
monk from Rikers Island.
Oh yes.
I was snort laughing. And but going off what you were saying, yes. Let's say that there is a higher form of consciousness in like the known universe that is beyond our own understanding, and let's say they do occasionally view our planet. I go off with what George Carlin said. Basically, one of his bits involved, and I'm paraphrasing here, what are we gonna tell the Intergalactic Space Council when the first teenage mom on Mars dumps her newborn into a dumpster? And
Oh,
and it's like, yes, it like all those things, very very heavy subject matter, but like again the tone, making it light, actually is a good way of reflecting on it, and like highlighting some of the things that could be better. But it's that's the thing about life. It's so unpredictable, and it can be chaotic, and you got to learn to love it for
that's
what it
right.
is.
And then one of the last stories in this collection is "Find Me in the Mirror," and honestly, that was the hardest of them all for me to write. I didn't have a really happy childhood in a lot of ways. I've got some scars, but as a person, you live with your scars. They might have healed to an extent, but the damage you have internally, you carry it with you, and it does change you. It makes you who you are. And I think that we all have survival instinct, and we come up with ways to deal with our past and overcome the struggles that we've had. And it's just part of your skills that you've accumulated through life. And once you've overcome something, no one can ever take that from you. It is a kind of a bonding experience if you've overcome whatever the challenges in life, and you meet another person that's done the same. We may have had a different path to get through our pain, but that can be a very bonding experience with another person, and it's a bittersweet look at, what I had to do to overcome some of the scars that I've had, basically. So Fatal Distractions is an unusual mixture because it does have a little bit of everything, I think. And thank you so much for contributing to that.
Thank you for for choosing me and my skill set. Even though I mean, I would say I'm probably novice. Even though I've done my own writing stuff on the sidelines. This is my first published work, so I am eternally grateful for you helping me kick open the door for this kind of opportunity into this style of life and this vocation. And going back to it, Find Me in the Mirror definitely was, I think, probably the most relative of the stories for me personally, other than Thirst.
Especially in this day and age, like, we all know someone who has dealt with some type of addiction, and that person goes through their own reality when they're struggling and when they're in the pit, so to speak, of dealing with this addiction. And it looks very different to them than what the outside sees. And so, I mean, that story really hit me because I've known many friends to go through various different addictions, and some make it out the pit and some don't. And I really liked your story. It was amazing.
Well, what I also wanted to highlight when I wrote it was the fact that now, especially towards the end, where with Max's inner monologue and still building his life after, well, it highlights the struggle of the fact that when you succumb to, because and especially being down here in Florida, I have friends that do their own things in the privacy of either their own homes or at a bar or at some kind of special social event. It happens all the time. In my opinion, there's nothing wrong with it where it becomes a problem, where it becomes an extreme problem, especially for the detriment of your own health and the health of those that you truly love, is when it becomes a crutch. And
Right.
a lot of people say they can stop X and X at any kind of time, but when the time comes that it needs to happen, be it on your terms or from something outside of your control, not everyone can actually make that sacrifice. Not even a sacrifice, that commitment to making
Mm-hmm.
sure that it is no longer a presence in your life that causes that causes pain or or even numbs you from the very
Mm-hmm.
world and reality that you're in. And even when you go through that process, and you think everything's good, it still can be there. It's no different than the shadow, your own
Right.
shadow.
It is a thirst. I get your story was great. And that it's like that with any form of addiction. Um, and you most addictions come out of you trying to hide from some pain in your life, or some, again, a way to escape reality temporarily. And it's great for a while, whatever it is. If you choose drinking, whatever, um, it takes you out of your momentary pain, but then that itself becomes the source of pain when you cannot pull yourself away from it to really deal with life, which we do have to do.
Hmm.
And the story was great as it really highlights, what happens to your loved ones. What did they go through when they watch you dealing with this thirst that you cannot quench? What happens? And I really liked that part of your story, that it wasn't just about the main character and his problem. It was, you really saw a lot of his family members who were reaching out and trying to help, and he didn't understand that. He couldn't grasp it until the end, and the pain that they go through is very real too.
It can be unbearable at times, and I'm glad I got the opportunity, that you gave the opportunity for me to tell it, because what was it? Originally, Thirst was meant to be was a screenplay I had made for the YouTube channel host there, Saturn Lunar Nova. We had done some what is it? We had filmed our own comedy sketch series back in 2018, and Saturn and I had both have an extreme love for old school anthology series like the Twilight Zone and the Midnight Gallery, and and the Outer Limits and stuff like that. And when I first came down to Florida back in 2019, I was over at Daytona there. I got the thought, heck, let's try to film let's try to film our own horror anthology, something supernatural. Let's see where this can go. And then when 2020 hit, unfortunately, any writing projects that I had saved for the screen were absolutely null and void because of COVID. And after COVID, that also changed the team that we had on the channel, because everyone was hunkered down and everyone started doing their own thing.
Yeah.
So, point of the matter is, thank you for helping me get this story, and I know future stories out because they're just sitting on my shelf and I want to tell them.
Well, hey, don't throw out anything. I've also learned that as a hard lesson. I keep a journal or a notepad beside the bed. I've talked about this, before. You never know when you're going to have a great idea, and I often have trouble sleeping. I have nightmares. I have just, insomnia, and then go through periods of night terrors and just all kinds of sleep issues. And I'll literally wake up terrified from something that in my mind, it's very real until I realize that it was a dream, a night terror. And I'll write it down. And you never know when something is going to come back even years later that you can build a great story on. I have an old file that I've kept, miscellaneous papers and, napkins, and wrote down ideas. Just toss it in. You never know.
No,
Hey,
I
you're
know
at a bar,
exactly
you're
what you
having a
mean.
drink, right? You got a story, you got to write it down. You got to write down the main idea. Really funny. There's actually a novel that I'm working on. It's going to be a while in the making or getting ready, but
Actually,
I actually did pull out something from the files from years ago when I was drunk, and who knows where I was at the time, and it's going to be another novel. So
that actually might have just answered my next question. I was going to ask if you have any future projects that you're anticipating. It sounds like you do.
yes, absolutely. Like I said, the last 2.5 years have been all about me really learning this business and how to publish my own work, and the full length novel When the White Knight Falls, that's the only full length novel so far, but most of my works have been short stories. But like I said, I have actually 2 other full length dark fantasy novels that are coming up here, and we're going to release it under the name of Genesis Rising.
Mm-hmm.
And this is really making me nervous because this is going to be the first full length novel that really goes into the dark fantasy. Romance was a more comfortable place for me to get started with a full novel.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm really excited about these 2 works, and they started out as scribbles on a napkin. Um, it's
I can't wait to reserve my copies.
right.
Now, a couple more questions. With all this talk of writing and art and whatnot, tell me, do you do anything else outside of writing, publishing, or art? And if so, how do you balance those aspects of your life in any way?
Well, I don't know that you'd say I really balance it very well because I'm kind of a obsessive and compulsive writer. This is part of how I relax and the I call it the brain vomit. The just getting it out of your head. Um, that's what helps me deal with the stress of life, and so that I do it all the time. It's not really, the writing is easy. It's the editing and the,
and,
you know,
and the
making everything
publishing.
perfect and then learning how to publish. That's been really the work part of it. I think the writing is fun. It's just,
Yeah, like going back.
outside of that, I mean, music, art, role playing games, anything that's creative, I think it really helps you come up with those stories and fine tune them.
Yeah, and like going back to it, like actually, this reminds me of the second episode of this season when I interviewed Rick Savage from Black Velvet Seductions. There, when you get it fully, the writing piece fully published, that's just the easy part because also the hardest part is what comes after, and that's the
Yeah,
constant advertising and making sure that like people know that these works exist, especially in a field of art, in a field of work where your product is so numerous and so competitive.
yeah,
It can be overwhelming, I'm sure.
it is. It is. And I mean, everybody wants to have, acknowledgement for their hard work. Um, but you have to do it because you love it. I mean, we've heard musicians and other artists say this many, many times, and it absolutely is true. Um, Parts of the process come easy to me, and parts are really hard. So you have to love it to do it. It's not something that you just do because you're bored or you do it, for a living only, just for a paycheck. It's not about that. It's about the passion of creating, of writing. It's you have to do it because you love the process and the fun parts and the bad parts. It's just part of you have to take them both.
Well, with all that being said, I got one more question left, but after everything we've discussed so far, after everything you've said in the past 41 minutes, like if you can think of anything else, like what is another piece of artistic advice you would have for up and coming writers?
Right. Just right. If that's your art, if that's your game, like I said, nothing is taboo. You can always fix it later. Just have a journal, keep it by your bed, keep one in your backpack or purse if you're a lady, wherever. Have something with you at all times that you can jot down ideas because you never know where a great story is gonna come from. The inspiration is everywhere, and you can take time to edit and to polish things, but the important thing is that you just allow yourself to get those ideas down and you just don't be hard on yourself. Not every idea is gonna turn into a great story, but often it's the ones that you weren't expecting that will. And so, I have a good friend actually. He's in a metal band called Fractured, and he once
Nice.
told me the same thing. You do it because you love the craft. You just love to do it. Every other motivation, if it's money, success, your picture on Time magazine or Rolling Stone, whatever, that's not going to keep you going. You do it because you love to do it.
Well, that is beautiful. Well, folks, when it comes to the world of writing and the processes, where the inspiration comes from, where the inspiration for the passion comes from, flat out, folks, we've got nothing. I'd like to thank you once again, Virginia, for coming on to this podcast. I'd like to thank you for featuring my work in the short story collection, Fatal Distractions. And also, speaking of which, I would love to give shout outs to Lauren A. Douglas and Chris Taylor, who were the other writers who were featured in the short story collection. And if you would like to purchase Fatal Distractions is on Amazon. It is featured as an ebook and in paperback. And if you would like to follow Virginia, please visit virginiawallace.com. And if you would personally like to follow Miss Wallace, please follow her at Virginia Wallace on Facebook and on Twitter. And of course, if you would like to see what I personally produce in the future, please follow me on Instagram, Catalyst Jost, that is CATALY5TJ05T, Daniel Evans Jost on Facebook. And if you would like to see what Life on Saturn Productions has cooking in the future or currently right now as we speak, please follow Life on Saturn Productions on Instagram, Facebook, and YouTube. And with all that being said, folks, please keep your vibes dope, keep your zen flowing, and as always, peace.